A young black man stopped to help a blind elderly gentleman at the airport, not knowing that a simple act of kindness would change his life forever. The next morning, as he opened his apartment door, his hands trembled at the sight of who was standing there, the man who could transform everything he'd been fighting for. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Aiden Jackson's worn sneakers squeaked against the polished floor of Atlanta International Airport, each step echoing his racing heartbeat. The scholarship interview he'd fought so hard to secure was exactly 47 minutes away, and he was cutting it closer than he'd ever wanted to. His backpack felt heavy against his shoulder, filled with transcripts, letters of recommendation, and the research proposal he'd spent months perfecting. The morning had started badly. His mother's condition had flared up again, her multiple sclerosis making it impossible for her to even hold a glass of water. He'd spent precious time helping her take her medication, making sure she was comfortable before he left. The taxi he'd called never showed up, forcing him to take 2 buses to reach the airport. Now, racing through Terminal B, Aiden could feel his dreams hanging by a thread. He glanced down at his best dress shirt, slightly wrinkled from the bus ride but still presentable. The shirt was a hand-me-down from his cousin, just like most of his clothes, but it was the nicest thing he owned. His mother had stayed up late last night ironing it, her hands shaking but determined. "You're going to shine tomorrow, baby," she'd said, her voice weak but her smile strong. "This interview is your chance." The Emerging Technologies Scholarship at Stanford was more than just a chance. It was everything. Full ride, housing covered, and a guaranteed internship. It was the key to pulling himself and his mother out of their tiny 1-bedroom apartment, the opportunity to finally get her the treatment she deserved. 3 years of perfect grades at community college while working part-time jobs had led to this moment. Aiden weaved through the crowd, mumbling, "Excuse me," and "sorry" as he navigated around rolling suitcases and tired travelers. The morning rush was in full swing, a sea of people moving in every direction. The interview was at a private office just 15 minutes from the airport. If he could just make it through security in the next 20 minutes, he'd still have a shot. That's when he heard it. A soft thud followed by a frustrated sigh. Aiden's steps slowed involuntarily as he turned toward the sound. An elderly man in an expensive-looking suit had dropped his cane, which had skittered a few feet away across the smooth floor. The man's hands were outstretched, feeling the air in front of him, his clouded eyes searching uselessly. People streamed past on both sides, some glancing at the man but quickly looking away. Others, too, absorbed in their phones or conversations to even notice. The man's dignity seemed to shrink with each passing second, his shoulders tensing as he stood there vulnerable and alone. Aiden checked his watch again, 42 minutes until the interview. His mind raced with calculations. Security line, walking time, traffic. Every second counted. He took a step forward, then stopped. His mother's voice echoed in his head. "Kindness matters more than success, Aiden. Without it, success is just empty noise." He closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and turned back. "Excuse me, sir," Aiden said, approaching the elderly man. "Let me help you with that." The man's face turned toward his voice, relief washing over his features. "Oh, thank you, young man. I'm afraid I'm quite lost without my cane." Aiden retrieved the cane, gently placing it in the man's hand. "There you go, sir. Are you trying to get somewhere specific? I can help you find your way." "Actually, yes," the man replied, his voice carrying a quiet authority despite his vulnerable state. "I'm supposed to be heading to Gate C42, but I'm afraid all these renovations have me completely turned around. Everything feels different from my last visit." Aiden's heart sank as he looked at his watch again. Gate C42 was in the opposite direction of his security checkpoint. Helping this man would definitely mean missing his interview. He stared at the text message from Dr. Collins confirming the time. 9:30 a.m. No exceptions. No reschedules. The elderly man must have sensed his hesitation. "Please don't trouble yourself if you're in a hurry. Someone else will come along eventually." Aiden looked at the man's clouded eyes, at the way his hands gripped the cane just a little too tightly. He thought about his mother, about her quiet dignity in the face of her illness, about how she never let it break her spirit. What would she think if he walked away now? "It's no trouble at all, sir," Aiden said, his voice steady despite the storm in his chest. "Gate C42 is this way. May I?" He offered his arm, and the elderly man took it gratefully. As they began walking together, Aiden tried not to think about the opportunity slipping away with each step. The man introduced himself as Dr. Samuel Blackwood, and Aiden noticed a small company pin on his lapel, though he couldn't make out the logo. What Aiden couldn't know, was that this simple act of kindness was about to set in motion a chain of events that would reshape his entire future. The weight of Dr. Blackwood's hand on Aiden's arm felt like both a blessing and a burden. Each step they took through Atlanta International's bustling Terminal B drew them further from Aiden's dream interview. But there was something about the elderly man's quiet dignity that made it impossible to rush him or abandon him. "Young man," Dr. Blackwood said, as they carefully navigated around a family wrestling with oversized luggage, "I don't believe I caught your name." "It's Aiden, sir. Aiden Jackson." "Well, Aiden, I appreciate your patience with an old fool who can't seem to find his way anymore." Dr. Blackwood's voice carried a hint of frustration beneath its cultured tone. "These eyes of mine, they've been getting worse each year. I used to be able to at least make out shapes and shadows, but now—" He trailed off, his free hand tightening on his cane. Aiden checked his watch again. 9:22 a.m. The interview was officially a lost cause. He swallowed hard, pushing down the bitter taste of disappointment. "It's really no problem, sir. We all need help sometimes." As they approached the security checkpoint between terminals, Officer Brian Reynolds stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as they fell on Aiden. The young man felt the familiar weight of suspicion settle over him, a weight he'd carried too many times before. "Everything all right here?" Officer Reynolds asked, his hand resting casually on his belt, as he directed his question to Dr. Blackwood. Before Aiden could speak, Dr. Blackwood's voice rang out with surprising authority. "This young gentleman is kindly helping me find my gate. Is there a problem, officer?" Reynolds' expression shifted slightly, but his eyes remained fixed on Aiden. "Just doing my job, sir. Making sure everything's in order. You can never be too careful these days." Aiden felt his face grow hot, but he kept his voice steady. "I'm just helping him get to gate C42, sir, that's all." The officer nodded slowly, stepping aside but maintaining his watchful gaze. As they passed through the checkpoint, Aiden could feel Reynolds' eyes boring into his back. Dr. Blackwood's grip on his arm tightened slightly, a subtle gesture of support that nearly brought tears to Aiden's eyes. They walked in silence for a moment before Dr. Blackwood spoke again. "You seem tense, Aiden. Was there somewhere you needed to be?" Aiden hesitated, then decided honesty was the best policy. "Actually, yes, sir. I had a scholarship interview at 9:30. Dr. Blackwood stopped walking. "Had? As in, you're missing it now?" "Yes, sir." Aiden's voice was quiet, but firm. "But it's okay. There'll be other opportunities." "Young man, you shouldn't have," Dr. Blackwood started, but Aiden gently urged him forward. "Please, sir, it's fine. We're almost to your gate. Let's get you there safely." They continued walking, passing by busy shops and crowded boarding areas. A group of business people rushed past, their rolling briefcases creating a maze that Aiden carefully helped Dr. Blackwood navigate. The elderly man's movements were cautious but deliberate, each step measured and careful. "Tell me about this scholarship," Dr. Blackwood said as they walked. "It must have been important." Aiden took a deep breath. "It's the Emerging Technology Scholarship at Stanford. Full ride, housing, everything, plus an internship that could—" He stopped himself, not wanting to burden the man with his problems. "What could what?" Dr. Blackwood pressed gently. "That could help me take care of my mom," Aiden finished quietly. "She has MS and the medical bills. Well, You know how it is. Dr. Blackwood was silent for a moment, his clouded eyes facing forward. Yes, he said finally. I do know how it is. My late wife had lupus. The costs can be overwhelming. They reached gate C42, where a small crowd was gathering for the boarding call. Aiden helped Dr. Blackwood find a seat near the gate counter, making sure he was comfortable. Will you be all right from here, sir? Aiden asked, knowing he should at least try to call Dr. Collins's office, even if it was futile. Dr. Blackwood reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, holding it out in what he hoped was Aiden's direction. Take this, young man. You've shown remarkable character today. The world needs more people like you. Aiden took the card, noting its thick, textured paper, but in his current state of mind, he barely registered the company name or contact information. Thank you, sir. Have a safe flight. As Aiden turned to leave, Dr. Blackwood called after him. Sometimes, Aiden, the right choice doesn't feel like it at the moment, but trust that kindness has a way of finding its path back to you. Fighting back tears, Aiden hurried away from the gate. His phone showed 3 missed calls from Dr. Collins's office. With trembling fingers, he dialed the number, already knowing what he would hear. The receptionist's voice was polite but firm. The interview slot had passed, and there would be no rescheduling. The scholarship committee had a strict policy. Standing in the middle of the busy terminal, Aiden felt the weight of his choice crash down upon him. He thought of his mother, of how proud she'd been when he got the interview, of all the extra shifts she'd picked up at the pharmacy before her MS got too bad, just to help him through community college. How could he tell her he'd thrown away their best chance? Yet even as the pain of his lost opportunity threatened to overwhelm him, a small voice in his head, sounding surprisingly like his mother's, whispered that he'd done the right thing. He clutched Dr. Blackwood's business card in his pocket, a small reminder that sometimes the measure of a person isn't in what they achieve, but in what they're willing to sacrifice for others. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The bus ride home felt infinitely longer than the morning's journey. Aiden sat near the back, his backpack clutched tightly in his lap, still full of now useless documents and preparation materials. Each bump and turn of the bus seemed to mock his earlier optimism, his dreams of Stanford fading with every mile. He pulled out his phone, reading, Dr. Collins's email, one more time. Mr. Jackson, we regret to inform you that due to your absence at the scheduled interview time, your application for the Emerging Technologies Scholarship has been withdrawn from consideration. As stated in our policy, we do not offer alternative interview dates. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. Future endeavors. The words felt hollow, empty. Aiden closed his eyes, leaning his head against the cool glass of the bus window. The morning played on repeat in his mind. Dr. Blackwood's grateful smile, Officer Reynolds' suspicious glare, the weight of choice and consequence pressing down on his shoulders. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. How did the interview go, baby? Can't wait to hear all about it. Aiden's throat tightened. He couldn't bring himself to respond, not yet. How could he explain that he'd sacrifice their chance at a better life to help a stranger, even if it was the right thing to do, even if his mother would understand? The weight of disappointment felt crushing. The bus lurched to a stop at his neighborhood, the familiar sight of run-down shops and tired buildings greeting him. As he walked the 3 blocks to their apartment complex, Aiden's hand brushed against the business card in his pocket. He pulled it out, really looking at it for the first time. The card was thick, expensive-feeling paper with raised lettering. Dr. Samuel Blackwood, CEO Emeritus, Blackwood Technologies. Below that was a phone number and email address. Aiden's steps slowed as he stared at the card. Blackwood Technologies, one of the largest tech companies in the country. He'd read about them in his computer science classes, studied their innovations, But surely this couldn't be Dr. Blackwood. He shook his head, pushing away the spark of hope. Even if it was the same person, what difference would it make? He tucked the card back into his pocket and climbed the stairs to their third-floor apartment. His mother was sitting in her favorite armchair by the window, a book open in her lap. Despite her illness, Michelle Jackson's face lit up with a smile that could warm the coldest day. "There's my future Stanford student," she exclaimed, then her expression shifted as she saw his face. "Aiden, what's wrong, baby?" He dropped his backpack by the door, the weight of the morning finally breaking through. "Mom, His voice cracked. "I missed the interview." "Missed it? But you left so early." She started to stand, but her legs weren't cooperating today. Aiden quickly moved to her side, kneeling next to her chair. "There was this man at the airport, Mom. An elderly blind man who needed help finding his gate. He'd dropped his cane and nobody was helping him, and I just—" Aiden's words tumbled out, his eyes filling with tears. "I couldn't leave him there. I couldn't." His mother's hand found his face, wiping away a tear with her thumb. Her own eyes were glistening, but her smile was proud. "Of course you couldn't. You're your father's son. He never could walk past someone in need either." "But Mom, the scholarship, your treatments. I messed everything up." Aiden's voice was barely a whisper. Michelle Jackson shook her head firmly. "Listen to me, Aiden Jackson. You did not mess anything up. You showed exactly the kind of man you are, the kind of man I raised you to be. There will be other scholarships, other opportunities. But character? That's something you either have or you don't." Dr. Collins's office said there's no rescheduling, no second chances. Aiden stood up, pacing the small living room. "I should have at least tried to find someone else to help him, or what? Left a vulnerable person alone when they needed help?" His mother's voice was gentle, but firm. "Tell me about him. This man you helped." Aiden sank onto their worn couch, pulling out the business card again. "His name is Dr. Samuel Blackwood. He was trying to get to gate C-42 and he couldn't see at all. He was so lost, Mom, and people just kept walking past him like he was invisible." His mother leaned forward slightly. "Dr. Blackwood? From Blackwood Technologies?" "Maybe. I mean, that's what the card says, but—" "Aiden, bring me my tablet." Her voice had an urgency to it. He handed her the tablet, watching as her shaking fingers typed the name into a search engine. A moment later, she turned the screen toward him. There, in high-resolution corporate photos, was Dr. Samuel Blackwood, younger and standing straight, his eyes clear and sharp, but unmistakably the same man Aiden had helped. "That's him," Aiden whispered, staring at the image. The article detailed Dr. Blackwood's legendary career, his innovations in technology, and his recent retirement due to failing health. "But Mom, even if he is who the card says, it doesn't change anything. The scholarship is gone." His mother reached for his hand, squeezing it with what strength she had. "Maybe not, but something tells me your story isn't finished yet, baby. Sometimes the best chapters come after we think the book is closed." Aiden sat with her for a while longer, letting her quiet strength wash over him. As the afternoon light filtered through their window, casting long shadows across their small apartment, he couldn't shake the feeling that his mother might be right. Something about Dr. Blackwood's parting words echoed in his mind. Kindness has a way of finding its path back to you. Later that night, as Aiden lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the business card sat on his nightstand, a small beacon of possibility in the darkness. Tomorrow, he decided he would make the call. After all, what did he have left to lose? Morning light crept through Aiden's bedroom window, finding him already awake, sitting at his small desk. He hadn't slept much. His mind was too busy replaying yesterday's events, weighing possibilities and consequences. Dr. Blackwood's business card sat before him like a challenge, its elegant lettering catching the early sunlight. The sounds of his mother's morning routine drifted through the thin walls, the slow shuffle of her feet, the quiet bump of her hand steadying herself against the hallway wall, the gentle clink of medicine bottles. Every sound reinforced why he needed to try something, anything, to find another path forward. Aiden picked up his phone, then set it down again. What would he even say? "Hi, remember me? The guy who helped you at the airport?" It sounded ridiculous in his head, but then he thought about his mother's words from last night. "Your story isn't finished yet, baby." From the kitchen came the sound of something falling, followed by his mother's frustrated sigh. Aiden was on his feet instantly, finding her leaning against the counter, a broken glass scattered across the floor, water spreading in a shallow puddle. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her hands trembling. "The glass just slipped." "It's okay, Mom. Don't move. There's glass everywhere." Aiden quickly grabbed their worn broom and dustpan. As he cleaned up the mess, he watched his mother's face, the quiet dignity there, the determination to stay strong despite her body's betrayal. It was the same expression he'd seen on Dr. Blackwood's face when he dropped his cane. After helping his mother settle at the kitchen table with a fresh glass of water, plastic this time, Aiden returned to his room. He picked up his phone again, this time with resolution. Before he could second-guess himself, he dialed the number from the card. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. Blackwood Technologies, Office of Dr. Samuel Blackwood. This is Olivia Pearson speaking. The voice was professional, efficient. Aiden's throat went dry. Yes, hello. My name is Aiden Jackson, first period. I met Dr. Blackwood yesterday at the airport. I helped him find his gate." There was a pause on the other end. "Ah, yes, Mr. Jackson. Dr. Blackwood mentioned you might call." The assistant's tone warmed slightly. "He asked me to put you through right away if you did." Before Aiden could process this information, there was a click, and then a familiar voice. "Aiden, is that you, young man?" "Yes, sir, Dr. Blackwood. I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all." The elderly man's voice carried the same quiet authority it had at the airport, but now there was something else there, a hint of warmth, perhaps even amusement. "In fact, I was hoping you'd call. I did some checking after our encounter yesterday. Stanford, was it? The Emerging Technologies Scholarship?" Aiden's heart skipped a beat. "Yes, sir. Quite prestigious. Dr. Catherine Collins runs that program. She's an old colleague of mine. She told me about a no-show yesterday morning. Said it was unlike anything she'd seen in the candidate's profile. Perfect grades, glowing recommendations, innovative research proposal. And then he simply didn't appear. Sir, I can explain." "No need, Aiden." "I already did." Dr. Blackwood's voice took on a gentle tone. "I told Catherine exactly why you missed that interview. About how you chose to help a blind old man instead of pursuing your own interests. About how you never once mentioned the interview while helping me. Never tried to rush me or abandon me." Aiden sank into his chair, emotions welling up in his throat. "I couldn't just leave you there, sir." "No, you couldn't." "That's exactly the point." Dr. Blackwood paused. "Aiden, would you be willing to come to my office today? Say, around 2 p.m.? There's something I'd like to discuss with you in person." Aiden's pulse quickened. "Your office? At Blackwood Technologies? Unless that's inconvenient?" "No. No, sir. Not at all. I can be there." "Excellent. Olivia will text you the address and details. And Aiden?" "Yes, sir?" "Bring those transcripts and that research proposal with you. I'd very much like to see them." After the call ended, Aiden sat in stunned silence until his phone buzzed with a text, detailed instructions from Olivia Pearson, including the address of Blackwood Technologies' downtown headquarters and a temporary security pass. He walked to the kitchen in a daze, finding his mother sipping her tea slowly, her hands steady enough for now. "Mom?" She looked up, something in his voice making her smile. "What is it, baby?" "That was Dr. Blackwood on the phone. He wants to meet with me. Today. At his office." His mother's face lit up with that special smile, the one that had gotten them through the hardest days after his father passed, the one that somehow made everything feel possible. "Well, then," she said, her voice strong despite her weakness, "we better make sure that shirt is ironed again." As Aiden helped his mother up from her chair, he felt something he hadn't experienced since yesterday morning. Hope. He didn't know what Dr. Blackwood wanted to discuss, but something in the man's voice, in the deliberate way he'd mentioned the scholarship and transcripts, made Aiden feel like maybe, just maybe, his mother had been right. Maybe his story wasn't finished after all. Maybe it was just beginning. The Blackwood Technologies building stretched towards the sky like a gleaming spear of glass and steel, its 50 stories dwarfing everything around it. Aiden stood at its base, his freshly ironed shirt suddenly feeling inadequate against the backdrop of such grandeur. Workers in expensive suits streamed past him through the revolving doors, their movements purposeful and confident. His mother had insisted on ironing his shirt again, her hands steadier in the early afternoon than they had been that morning. "Stand tall," she'd said, smoothing his collar. "You helped a man who needed it. That makes you every bit as worthy as anyone in that building." Now, clutching his worn backpack with his documents inside, Aiden took a deep breath and walked through the revolving door. The lobby was a vast expanse of marble and modern art, with a security desk that stretched along one wall like a command center. He approached slowly, conscious of how his old dress shoes squeaked against the polished floor. "Good afternoon," he said to the security guard, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm Aiden Jackson. I have an appointment with Dr. Blackwood at 2 p.m. The guard, different from Officer Reynolds at the airport but somehow carrying the same air of authority, checked his tablet. To Aiden's surprise, the man's expression softened. Yes, Mr. Jackson. Ms. Pearson has left specific instructions for you." He handed Aiden a temporary security badge with his name already printed on it. "Express elevator to the 50th floor. Ms. Pearson will meet you there." The express elevator was like nothing Aiden had ever experienced. Glass-walled, it offered an increasingly spectacular view of the city as it rose smoothly upward. Other passengers got off at various floors, each ding of the elevator marking another level of corporate hierarchy, until Aiden was alone for the final ascent to the top. When the doors opened on the 50th floor, Olivia Pearson was waiting. She was younger than Aiden had expected, perhaps in her early 30s, with a warm smile that helped ease some of his nervousness. "Mr. Jackson, welcome," she said, extending her hand. "Dr. Blackwood is looking forward to meeting with you again." She led him through a series of elegant corridors, the walls adorned with framed patents and awards. Aiden caught glimpses of the technologies that had made Blackwood Technologies a household name, innovations that he'd studied in his computer science classes. "Dr. Blackwood has been quite insistent about this meeting," Olivia said as they walked. "He rarely comes into the office these days, given his condition, but he made a special trip today." They stopped before a set of mahogany double doors. Olivia turned to Aiden with an encouraging smile. "Ready?" Aiden nodded, though his heart was pounding. Olivia opened the doors, revealing a corner office that seemed to float above the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view that took Aiden's breath away. Dr. Blackwood sat behind a massive desk, his unseeing eyes turned toward the windows. "Ah, Aiden," he said, turning at the sound of their entrance. "Thank you for coming. Olivia, could you give us a moment?" "Of course, sir." Olivia departed, closing the doors softly behind her. "Please sit down, Doctor." Blackwood gestured to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. "I imagine this is quite different from what you expected when you helped me at the airport yesterday." Aiden settled into the chair, trying to find his voice. "Yes, sir. I had no idea." "Was the lost old man the founder of Blackwood Technologies?" Dr. Blackwood smiled. "That was rather the point. You see, Aiden, in my position, it's rare to encounter genuine kindness. People either want something from me or they treat me like I'm made of glass because of my condition. He leaned forward slightly. But you helped me simply because I needed help. Do you know how rare that is? I just did what anyone would do, sir. No, Aiden. That's precisely the point. You didn't. Dozens of people walked past me yesterday. You were the only one who stopped. And you did so knowing it would cost you something precious. Dr. Blackwood's clouded eyes seemed to look right through him. Tell me about your research proposal, the one you were going to present to Stanford. Aiden swallowed hard, then reached into his backpack for the document. It's about developing adaptive technology for people with disabilities, sir. Specifically creating more intuitive interfaces for people with motor control issues. He paused, thinking of his mother. I've seen firsthand how current technology can fall short. Your mother's condition? Dr. Blackwood asked gently. Yes, sir. Sometimes her hands shake so badly she can't use a touchscreen. The current accessibility options aren't enough. I believe we can do better. Dr. Blackwood nodded slowly, a smile spreading across his face. You know, Aiden, I've been thinking about starting a new division at Blackwood Technologies, one focused specifically on adaptive technology. We have the resources, the talent. What we've been missing is someone with the right vision, someone who understands not just the technology, but the human element. Aiden's heart skipped a beat. Sir? How would you like to head up that division, Aiden? We'll put you through school, of course. Full ride, just like the Stanford scholarship. But instead of just an internship, you'll have a real position waiting for you. A chance to make your ideas reality. The room seemed to spin around Aiden, but sir, I don't have the experience. Experience can be gained, Aiden. Character, true character, that's something else entirely. Yesterday you showed me exactly who you are. That's worth more than any degree or certification. Aiden sat in stunned silence, his mother's words echoing in his mind. Sometimes the best chapters come after we think the book is closed. Aiden gripped the arms of the leather chair, trying to steady himself as Dr. Blackwood's words sank in. The city stretched out behind the elderly man, a glittering canvas of possibility that suddenly seemed within reach. His throat felt tight, emotions threatening to overwhelm his carefully maintained composure. I don't know what to say, sir, Aiden managed finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Blackwood smiled, reaching for a folder on his desk with practiced precision. Then let me say more. Olivia has prepared a complete proposal, full scholarship to complete your degree at Georgia Tech, closer to home than Stanford, so you can keep an eye on your mother. A paid internship position while you study and then a full-time role as Director of Adaptive Technologies upon graduation. He slid the folder across the desk. There's more. Our company's medical insurance is quite comprehensive. It would cover your mother's treatments, including experimental therapies that aren't typically covered by standard plans. Aiden's hands trembled as he opened the folder. The numbers on the page made his head spin. A salary that could move his mother out of their cramped apartment. Medical coverage that could give her a real chance at improvement. Opportunities he'd only dreamed about. Sir, this is incredible, but... Aiden paused, gathering his courage. Why me? There must be hundreds of more qualified candidates. Dr. Blackwood leaned back in his chair, his clouded eyes seeming to look into the distance. Let me tell you something, Aiden. When I started losing my sight 5 years ago, it changed everything. Not just how I lived, but how people treated me. Suddenly, I wasn't the CEO who built this company. I was just a blind man who needed help. He gestured to the window. Yesterday in that airport, you didn't see a CEO or a blind man. You just saw someone who needed help, and you helped, even at great personal cost. That's the kind of person I want leading this division. Someone who understands that technology isn't just about innovation, it's about helping people maintain their dignity. There was a soft knock at the door, and Olivia entered with a tablet in hand. I'm sorry to interrupt, Dr. Blackwood, but you have your medical appointment in 30 minutes. Ah, yes, thank you, Olivia. Dr. Blackwood turned back to Aiden. Take the proposal home. Read it over with your mother. But know this, that scholarship interview you missed, that wasn't the end of your story, Aiden. It was just the beginning of a better one. Aiden stood, clutching the folder to his chest. Thank you, sir. I don't know how to repay your kindness. Pay it forward, Aiden. That's all I ask. Help others the way you helped me. Build technology that makes a difference in people's lives. Dr. Blackwood stood, extending his hand with surprising accuracy. And, please, call me Samuel. I have a feeling we're going to be working together for a long time. As Olivia led him back to the elevator, Aiden felt like he was floating. The folder in his hands represented everything he'd ever dreamed of, and more. She smiled at him as they waited for the elevator to arrive. You know, she said, I've worked for Dr. Blackwood for 7 years. I've never seen him so excited about a new initiative, or about a new person. Aiden looked at her curious. How did he know? About the scholarship interview, about my mother. Olivia's smile widened. After you helped him yesterday, he asked me to look into you. It wasn't hard to find. Your application to Stanford was impressive. Perfect grades while working part-time jobs, research proposals focused on adaptive technology, glowing recommendations from your professors. But what really caught his attention was your personal essay about caring for your mother. The elevator arrived with a soft ding. Dr. Blackwood lost his wife to illness 10 years ago, Olivia continued as they stepped inside. He understood exactly why you were rushing to that interview, which made your choice to help him even more meaningful. As the elevator descended, Aiden watched the city levels drop away, but instead of feeling small against the towering building, he felt tall, strong, capable. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from his mother. How did it go, baby? He smiled, typing back, Coming home now, Mom. Everything's about to change. When he reached the lobby, the security guard who had greeted him earlier gave him a knowing smile and a nod. Aiden walked through the revolving doors into the bright afternoon sunlight, the folder tucked safely under his arm. The same building that had seemed so intimidating just hours ago now felt like a beacon of hope. Standing on the sidewalk, Aiden looked up at the towering structure of Blackwood Technologies, thinking about how a single act of kindness had transformed his future. His mother's words echoed in his mind. Character is something you either have or you don't. Yesterday, his character cost him a scholarship. Today, it has given him something far greater, not just an opportunity, but a chance to make a real difference in the world. As he headed toward the bus stop, Aiden's steps were lighter than they had been in years. He couldn't wait to tell his mother everything, about Dr. Blackwood's offer, about the medical coverage, about all the possibilities that had suddenly opened up before them. For the first time since his father's passing, since his mother's diagnosis, since all the struggles began, Aiden felt something he hadn't dared to feel in a long time. Certainty. Certainty that everything was going to be okay. More than okay. It was going to be extraordinary. The bus ride home was a blur of emotion for Aiden. He held the folder from Blackwood Technologies like a precious treasure, his mind racing with possibilities. Each bump and turn brought him closer to home, closer to sharing this miracle with his mother. Other passengers must have noticed his barely contained excitement. He caught several people smiling at him, perhaps remembering their own moments of life-changing joy. An elderly woman across the aisle even caught his eye and said, "Whatever it is, young man, I hope it's as good as that smile suggests." The familiar sight of his neighborhood looked different somehow, as if the golden late-afternoon light was painting everything with possibility. Even the broken concrete steps of their apartment building seemed less daunting today. When he reached their building, Aiden took the stairs 2 at a time, his usual caution about conserving energy forgotten in his excitement. The folder pressed against his chest felt like it contained not just papers, but dreams made tangible. He paused at their door, taking a deep breath to compose himself. Through the thin walls, he could hear the soft sound of his mother's favorite gospel music playing, the songs she turned to when her pain was acting up. Today it was, "His Eye is on the Sparrow," the same song she'd sung to him as a child during thunderstorms. He opened the door to find her in her usual spot by the window, but today she was holding herself differently, tension visible in her shoulders. The sunlight caught the silver strands in her hair, highlighting how much she'd aged in the past few years. She turned at his entrance, and Aiden could see she'd been crying. "Mom?" His excitement faltered, heart dropping at the sight of her tears. "What's wrong?" Michelle Jackson wiped her eyes quickly, trying to smile. "It's nothing, baby. Just a bad day. The doctor called about the latest test results and—" She shook her head, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted her position in the chair. "The progression is faster than they thought. They want to try a new treatment, but, of course, insurance." She shook her head again. "Never mind that now. Tell me about your meeting. Was it really him? Dr. Blackwood?" Aiden crossed the room, kneeling beside her chair, his heart pounding with the perfect timing of what he was about to share. "Mom, whatever the doctor said, whatever's wrong, it's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay now. Better than okay." He opened the folder, hands trembling with emotion as he showed her the papers inside. The afternoon light streamed through the window, illuminating the Blackwood Technologies letterhead. "Dr. Blackwood didn't just offer me a job, Mom. He's giving me everything. A full scholarship to Georgia Tech, right here in Atlanta, so I can stay close to you. A paid internship while I'm studying, and then—" He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "A position as Director of Adaptive Technologies when I graduate." His mother's hands shook as she took the papers, her eyes widening as she read. "Oh, Aiden." She squinted at the pages, trying to focus through her tears. "These numbers, are they real?" "But that's not even the best part, Mom." He turned to the page about medical benefits, his finger underlining each crucial point. "Look at this. Their insurance plan, it covers everything. All your treatments, even the experimental ones Dr. Martinez wanted to try. Full coverage, no deductible, and there's no waiting period. It starts immediately." Michelle's hand went to her mouth, tears flowing freely now. "Baby, are you serious? Is this real? Not just some dream I'm having in this chair?" "It's real, Mom. Dr. Blackwood, he understands. He lost his wife to illness, and when I helped him yesterday, when I missed that interview to help him—" Aiden's voice caught as he remembered the airport, the choice that had seemed so devastating at the time. "He said it showed him exactly who I am. That character matters more than experience. That helped him when I told him everything he needed to know about me." His mother reached out, pulling him into a tight hug. For a moment, they just held each other, years of struggle and sacrifice flowing between them in waves of emotion. The gospel music played softly in the background, a hymn about faith and perseverance that seemed perfectly chosen for this moment. When she finally pulled back, her smile was radiant despite her tears. "Your father would be so proud of you," she whispered, cupping his face in her hands like she used to when he was small. "So proud of the man you've become. He always said you had his heart and my strength. Looks like he was right." Aiden helped her stand, supporting her as they walked to the kitchen table to look at the papers more closely. Her steps were unsteady, but her spirit seemed lighter already. As they sat together going through each detail of the offer, his mother's hands grew steadier, as if hope itself was strengthening her. "Look at these numbers, baby," she said, pointing to the salary figures. "We could move somewhere closer to the office. Somewhere with an elevator so you don't have to worry about me with these stairs. Maybe even in one of those new buildings with security and a doorman. And somewhere with a real office for me to work from," Aiden added, getting caught up in the planning. "Maybe even a small garden for you. I know how much you miss growing your roses. Remember how Dad used to say you could make anything bloom?" She laughed softly, the sound like music to his ears. He exaggerated. I killed plenty of plants, but yes, a little garden would be heaven. She ran her finger down the page. And these medical benefits? Dr. Martinez was talking about a new treatment program, but I couldn't even consider it before. But now... They spent the next hour dreaming together, making plans they'd never dared to make before. His mother pulled out her old notebook, the one where she used to write down her hopes for his future, and they began filling in new pages. The medical bills, which had haunted their kitchen table like unwelcome ghosts, suddenly seemed manageable. The future, which had always felt like a heavy weight, now felt like an open road. I need to call Dr. Blackwood, Aiden said finally, reaching for his phone. Tell him I accept. Let him know I'm ready to start this new chapter. His mother caught his hand. Wait, baby. Are you sure? This is a big decision. Maybe you should sleep on it. Pray about it. Aiden shook his head, smiling. Mom, remember what you always told me? About how sometimes God puts us exactly where we need to be, even if we don't understand why at the time? She nodded, her eyes soft with memory. I remember. Just like how your father getting laid off led him to the job where he met all those people who helped us after he passed. Yesterday, I thought missing that interview was the worst thing that could happen. But if I hadn't been there, if I hadn't stopped to help Dr. Blackwood, he squeezed her hand. This is where I'm meant to be, Mom. I can feel it. This isn't just a job. It's a chance to help other people like us, to make technology that really makes a difference. Michelle Jackson looked at her son, seeing not just the young man before her, but all the years of determination and kindness that had led to this moment. Then make the call, baby. Start your new chapter. Your father always said blessings come to those who help others without expecting anything in return. Aiden pulled out his phone, finding Dr. Blackwood's card. As he dialed the number, his mother began humming along with the gospel music still playing softly in the background. But now it wasn't a comfort. For pain. It was a celebration of blessing. A melody of hope. Olivia answered on the second ring as if she'd been waiting for his call. Mr. Jackson? Dr. Blackwood hoped we'd hear from you today. Aiden looked at his mother, drawing strength from her encouraging smile. Yes, I've made my decision. I'd like to accept Dr. Blackwood's offer. All of it. He could hear the smile in Olivia's voice. Wonderful. Dr. Blackwood will be so pleased. Can you start tomorrow? Tomorrow? Aiden's eyes widened, glancing at his mother, who nodded enthusiastically. Is that too soon? Dr. Blackwood is quite eager to get the Adaptive Technology Division underway. He said something about not letting good opportunities wait. Aiden caught his mother's questioning look and gave her a thumbs up. Her face lit up with joy, years seeming to fall away from her features. No, he said into the phone, his voice strong and clear. Tomorrow is perfect. Tomorrow is exactly right. As he ended the call, his mother reached for his hand again. You know what this means, baby. Your story's not just beginning. It's becoming exactly what it was always meant to be. Dawn broke over Atlanta as Aiden adjusted his tie in the mirror, the new tie his mother had insisted on buying last night, despite his protests about waiting for his first paycheck. You need to look the part, she'd said, her eyes shining with pride as she handed him the carefully wrapped package. They'd spent their last bit of emergency money on it, but she wouldn't take no for an answer. Now, standing in their small bathroom, Aiden hardly recognized himself. The tie added something different to his usual shirt and slacks, a touch of authority, of belonging. His mother appeared in the doorway, leaning on her walker but looking stronger than she had in days. Look at you, she said softly. Every bit the executive. Aiden smiled, though his stomach was doing flips. I don't feel like an executive. What if I'm not ready for this, Mom? What if Dr. Blackwood realizes he made a mistake? She reached out, straightening his tie with steady hands, steadier than they'd been in weeks, as if her joy was medicine itself. No mistakes here, baby. You earned this moment, every bit of it. The same black car from yesterday was waiting outside their apartment building. Olivia had arranged for daily transportation. Until you get your first few paychecks, she'd explained. Doctor, Blackwood insists. The driver, introducing himself as Robert, held the door open with a warm smile. As the car pulled away, Aiden watched his mother waving from their window, her figure growing smaller, but her pride reaching him even as they turned the corner. The morning traffic parted smoothly for the executive vehicle, making the journey downtown feel like gliding through a different world. Blackwood Technologies looked even more impressive in the morning light. Employees streamed through the revolving doors, all purposeful steps and confident expressions. But today, Aiden wasn't just an observer. Today, he was one of them. Olivia met him in the lobby, her smile bright and welcoming. "Good morning, Aiden. Ready for your first day?" She handed him a permanent security badge, his photo already printed on it. "Dr. Blackwood wants to meet with you first to outline the vision for the Adaptive Technology Division." The express elevator felt different now, less intimidating, more like a gateway to possibility. When they reached the 50th floor, Olivia led him not to Dr. Blackwood's office, but to a large conference room with a stunning view of the city. Dr. Blackwood was already there, seated at the head of the table. "Ah, Aiden. Right on time. Please, sit down. We have quite a bit to discuss." As Aiden took his seat, he noticed the table was covered with documents, technical specifications, market research, and what looked like preliminary designs for various devices. Dr. Blackwood's hands moved surely across the papers, his fingers reading the braille labels on each folder. "I spent most of last night thinking about your research proposal," Dr. Blackwood began. "The one intended for Stanford. Your ideas about intuitive interfaces for people with motor control issues. They align perfectly with what I've been envisioning for this division." He pushed several folders toward Aiden. "These are some of our current projects. I want you to review them, see how we might integrate your approaches, but first, tell me more about your mother's experience with existing adaptive technologies." Aiden found himself speaking with unexpected confidence, describing the daily challenges his mother faced. Each point he made, Dr. Blackwood nodded, occasionally making notes on a specialized tablet designed for the visually impaired. "This is exactly why I wanted you for this position," Dr. Blackwood said when Aiden finished. "You understand these challenges not just technically, but personally. You know what's at stake." A knock at the door introduced Thomas Mitchell, the HR director, carrying more paperwork. But instead of the overwhelming bureaucracy Aiden expected, Thomas simply handed him a single tablet. "Everything's digital now," he explained with a smile, "including your mother's insurance details. All the paperwork is complete. She can see any specialist as early as today." Aiden's hand trembled slightly as he held the tablet. "Today? Really?" "I took the liberty of having Olivia contact Dr. Martinez's office," Dr. Blackwood added. "They can see your mother this afternoon for a consultation about that new treatment program. I've arranged for Robert to take her to and from the appointment." Emotion threatened to overwhelm Aiden, but he kept his voice steady. "Thank you, sir. This means everything." "Samuel?" Dr. Blackwood corrected gently. "We're colleagues now, Aiden. Speaking of which..." He gestured to Olivia, who brought forward another folder. "These are the preliminary plans for your office. It's on the 48th floor. I thought you might like a space to work that's close enough for easy consultation, but allows you to build your own team culture." The morning continued in a whirlwind of introductions, plans, and possibilities. Each person Aiden met greeted him with respect and enthusiasm, treating him not as an inexperienced newcomer, but as a valued colleague. By lunchtime, his head was spinning with information, but his heart was full of purpose. During a brief break, he called his mother. Her voice was bright with excitement. She'd already received a call from Dr. Martinez's office and was preparing for her afternoon appointment. "Can you believe it, baby?" she asked, her joy palpable even through the phone. 24 hours ago, we were worried about paying the light bill. Now, she paused, emotion catching in her throat. God is good, Aiden. He puts angels in our path when we need them most. Looking out over the city from his soon-to-be office, Aiden couldn't help but agree. Yesterday's act of kindness hadn't just changed his life, it had opened up a world of possibilities to help others facing similar challenges. As he ended the call with his mother, Dr. Blackwood's words from yesterday echoed in his mind. Pay it forward. And that's exactly what he intended to do. 6 months had passed since that fateful day at the airport. Aiden stood at the window of his office on the 48th floor, watching the sunset paint the Atlanta skyline in shades of gold and purple. The view still took his breath away, but it wasn't just the height or the spectacle. It was what it represented. His office had become a hub of innovation in adaptive technology. Prototypes of new devices lined the shelves, each one designed to make life easier for people with different abilities. The latest project, a smartphone interface specifically designed for people with tremors, was inspired by his mother's struggles. Early testing showed promising results. Speaking of his mother, Michelle Jackson was like a different person these days. The experimental treatment Dr. Martinez had recommended was working better than anyone had dared to hope. Her tremors had reduced significantly, and though she still had difficult days, her spirit was stronger than ever. They'd moved into a beautiful ground-floor apartment near Blackwood Technologies, complete with the small garden she'd dreamed of. A knock at his office door pulled Aiden from his thoughts. Olivia entered, followed by Dr. Blackwood, who moved with practiced ease through the space he'd come to know well over the past months. "Ready for the presentation?" Olivia asked, though her smile suggested she already knew the answer. Aiden nodded, gathering his materials. Today was a big day. The official launch of Blackwood Technologies' Adaptive Technology Division. They were presenting their first line of products to the board and the press. "More than ready," he replied, falling into step beside Dr. Blackwood as they headed to the conference room. "Mom's already in the audience," said wild horses couldn't keep her away. Dr. Blackwood chuckled. "Michelle wouldn't miss this for the world. She's become quite the advocate for our testing program, you know. The feedback group she started has been invaluable." Indeed, Michelle Jackson had found a new purpose in recent months. What started as her sharing her experiences with Aiden's team had grown into a formal focus group of people with various disabilities, all contributing their insights to make the technology truly useful. The main conference room was packed when they arrived. Journalists, board members, and various stakeholders filled the seats. Aiden spotted his mother in the front row, sitting tall and proud, her hands steady as she held her tablet, one of their first prototypes. As Aiden took his place at the podium, he caught sight of someone familiar in the audience, Officer Brian Reynolds from the airport. The security guard had been invited after Aiden ran into him a month ago and learned about his mother's struggles with Parkinson's disease. Today, Officer Reynolds sat beside his mother, who was testing one of their new devices. "Good afternoon, everyone," Aiden began, his voice clear and confident, a far cry from the nervous young man of 6 months ago. "Today marks not just the launch of a new division at Blackwood Technologies, but the beginning of a new approach to adaptive technology, one that puts real people's needs first." He gestured to his mother. "6 months ago, I was rushing to a scholarship interview when I met Dr. Blackwood at the airport. I had a choice to make: keep running toward what I thought was my only chance at a better future, or stop to help someone in need. That choice led me here, but more importantly, it taught me something crucial about innovation." Aiden clicked to the first slide, showing their new product line. True innovation doesn't come from just solving technical problems. It comes from understanding human needs. Every device you'll see today was developed with direct input from the people who will use it. Real people with real challenges, who deserve technology that works for them, not against them. The presentation continued, with Aiden demonstrating each product. The smartphone interface his mother had helped design. The adaptive keyboard was inspired by a college student with cerebral palsy. The voice-activated home control system, developed with input from veterans with limited mobility. When he finished, the room erupted in applause. Dr. Blackwood made his way to the podium, his face beaming with pride. When I met Aiden Jackson at the airport, I was just a blind man who needed help. His kindness that day showed me exactly the kind of person he was, someone who puts others first, who sees needs and meets them. That's exactly the spirit that drives innovation at Blackwood Technologies. After the presentation, as people mingled and examined the prototypes, Aiden found himself standing with his mother and Dr. Blackwood. "You know," Dr. Blackwood said thoughtfully, "that day at the airport, I had 3 other people walk right past me before you stopped, Aiden. Each of them probably had their own pressing concerns, their own reasons to hurry by, but you chose differently." Michelle squeezed her son's hand. "That's who he's always been. Even as a little boy, he could never see someone struggling without trying to help." "And now," Dr. Blackwood smiled, "that same instinct is helping thousands of people. Every device we launch, every life we make a little easier, it all traces back to that moment of choice." Aiden looked around the room, at the journalists testing their devices, at Officer Reynolds helping his mother try the new interface, at his own mother standing tall and strong beside him. One small act of kindness had created ripples that were still spreading outward, touching more lives than he could have imagined. "Sometimes," he said softly, "the best thing that can happen is missing what you thought was your only chance. Because sometimes life has something even better in mind." Dr. Blackwood nodded, his unseeing eyes bright with understanding. "Indeed. And sometimes, Aiden, helping a blind man find his way is really about finding your own." 1 year to the day after that fateful morning at the airport, Aiden Jackson stood in the terminal of Atlanta International, but this time he wasn't rushing anywhere. He was waiting, watching the streams of travelers flow past, each caught up in their own urgent missions and pressing deadlines. The location wasn't a coincidence. Dr. Blackwood had specifically chosen this spot, near the same staircase where they'd first met, to launch their newest initiative, the Blackwood Foundation's Technology for All program, which would provide adaptive technology to those who couldn't afford it. His mother stood beside him, elegant in a new dress, her hand steady as she checked her tablet. The experimental treatments had worked wonders over the past year, though there were still good days and bad. Today was definitely a good one. She'd insisted on being here, saying she needed to see the place where everything changed. "Hard to believe it's been a year," she said, looking around the busy terminal. "Feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once." Aiden nodded, adjusting his tie, the same one she'd bought him for his first day, now kept for special occasions. "I still remember exactly how it felt, standing here, thinking my whole future was slipping away. And instead," she smiled, "it was just beginning." The press had already gathered, setting up their cameras and microphones. Dr. Blackwood's driver had called to say they were 5 minutes out. The past year had seen remarkable changes at Blackwood Technologies. Their adaptive technology division had grown from a small team to over 50 people, and their products were changing lives across the country. But today's announcement was different. Today was about making sure that help reached those who needed it most, regardless of their ability to pay. A young woman rushed past them, clearly late for something, her heels clicking frantically against the floor. She reminded Aiden of himself a year ago, and he said a silent prayer that whatever she was rushing toward would work out for her. "He's here," Michelle whispered, spotting Dr. Blackwood's car pulling up outside. The doors opened, and Dr. Blackwood emerged, now using one of their newly designed smart canes, equipped with sensors and GPS technology to help visually impaired users navigate complex spaces. Olivia walked beside him, but he moved with confident independence. As they approached the gathered crowd, Aiden noticed something that made his heart skip. A young black man was helping an elderly woman with her bags, despite clearly being in a hurry himself. Dr. Blackwood must have sensed Aiden's distraction, Because he turned his head slightly. "What do you see, Aiden?" "History repeating itself," Aiden replied softly, watching the young man ensure the elderly woman was safely on her way before rushing off to his own destination. Dr. Blackwood smiled. Then we're in exactly the right place for this announcement. The press conference began with Dr. Blackwood taking the podium first. His voice carried clearly through the terminal, causing travelers to pause and listen. 1 year ago, on this very spot, I was a blind man who had lost his way. Dozens of people rushed past me, all too busy with their own concerns to stop. Except one. A young man named Aiden Jackson chose to help me, despite having every reason not to. That act of kindness revealed to me something I had forgotten in my years of running this company, that technology without humanity is meaningless. He gestured for Aiden to join him. The products we've developed over the past year have changed lives, but they remain out of reach for many who need them most. Today, we're changing that. The Blackwood Foundation's Technology for All program will ensure that our adaptive devices reach those who need them, regardless of their economic situation. Aiden took the microphone, his voice strong and sure. Every day, people face choices between helping others and helping themselves. Today, we're making that choice a little easier. Every device we sell will fund one for someone who can't afford it. Every breakthrough we make will be shared with those who need it most. The announcement continued, detailing the program's specifics. But Aiden found his attention drawn back to the spot where he'd first met Dr. Blackwood. How many moments like that happen every day? How many small choices shaped lives in ways no one could predict? After the press conference, as the cameras were being packed away, Dr. Blackwood pulled Aiden aside. "You know, Aiden, when I lost my sight, I thought my useful days were over. I thought I'd become nothing but a burden to others. But that day we met, you showed me something important, that needing help doesn't make you less valuable. Sometimes it makes you part of something greater." Aiden looked at his mother, who was chatting with Olivia, her movements fluid and confident in a way he'd once feared he'd never see again. "I understand that now better than ever. Which is exactly why you were the perfect choice to lead this initiative," Dr. Blackwood said. "You understand both sides, the desire to help and the need to be helped. It's what makes our technology work so well. It's built on empathy, not just innovation." As they prepared to leave the airport, Aiden caught sight of the young man from earlier, sprinting toward his gate. On impulse, Aiden called out to him, "Hey, whatever you're rushing to, good luck." The young man turned, surprised, then smiled and waved before disappearing into the crowd. Aiden's mother squeezed his arm. "Paying it forward, baby?" "Something like that," he replied, watching the spot where the young man had vanished. You never know when a small act of kindness might change everything. As they walked out of the terminal together, Aiden, his mother, Dr. Blackwood, and Olivia, the morning sun streamed through the windows, painting everything in shades of possibility. 1 year ago, a simple choice had changed not just Aiden's life, but countless others. And today, they'd ensured that chain of kindness would continue, reaching forward into a future bright with promise. Sometimes, Aiden realized, missing your chance at something good just means you're right on time for something better. You just have to be willing to stop, to help, to see the opportunity in the obstacle. After all, the best stories often begin with a simple act of kindness. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.